Anyway, it's nice to be here again. I think the last time was at least a few months ago, so it's good to see some new faces, some of the same faces. Elvis got in touch with me a few weeks ago and he said, would I be interested in telling you a bit more about Delta? And every time I come here, I feel a little bit like a fraud because technically I'm not an entrepreneur. I am employed by a company. I receive a salary and a commission. There's an element of an entrepreneurial aspect to that, but unlike the rest of you, I don't have my own business. However, my missus has a business, and I deal with business people on a day-to-day basis. So what I thought today I would do is I would give you a little presentation about Delta Light, but instead of doing it in a boring corporate presentation way, I'll try and deviate a little bit from what the slides are going to show you and give you a bit of a background, a bit of a behind-the-scenes story about the company. And hopefully some of those things can, be interpreted or applicable to your own business journey as you go through. So, Delta Light is a Belgian company. Like I said to a lot of people, it was started about 30 years ago. And the owners of the company looked around and they saw that everybody was doing Belgian chocolate, everybody was doing Belgian beer, everybody was doing Belgian lace and waffles. So it was becoming a commodity product. So what else could you do? And Delta Light was born. When people look at Delta Lights, a lot of times they see our webpage, they see our big brochures, and there's thousands of different lights and luminaries in there, and people think we're a lighting manufacturer. I always like to say that we're not a lighting manufacturer. We're in the business of transforming spaces. We're in the business of enhancing people's lives. We work closely with architects, designers, developers, and these are the people that usually build the space for the client. So the idea is that we hopefully bring our expertise and our knowledge that we have in lighting, and we help transform this space and make it better for the person, the human. So whilst we do sell lights as an end result, that's not our business. Our business is to make spaces amazing. There's a little slogan that our owner started when we say we make light that makes you see, light that makes you look, and light that animates the world around you. And that's the kind of a slogan that we go by. This is the family. It was started by designer Paul Ameloot. You can figure out which one of them is he, the gray hair. He started the company in 1987 and kind of actively started trading in 1989. His background was very simple. He was actually into producing aluminium constructions for disco business, if you believe it or not. So basically, if you think of the big discos and the dance halls of the late 80s, early 90s, a lot of times you had lots of lights going on. There was a lot of effects, and he would build the big aluminium rigs that would hold these lights. And he was an avid attendee of these kind of establishments. And what happened is he was kind of a young man himself. There was a lot of people that were coming to these events, and a lot of the people said, oh, obviously we're going to do this kind of light, can you create a fixture for this light, and you create that. And he spotted the business, and he realized that obviously a lot of people enjoy the sound, but they enjoy sound even more in the space when there's special light effects. He realized that a lot of the people came to these discos and nightclubs because of the light effects and things like that. So kind of planted a bit of a seed in his mind. So he swapped from doing mechanical designing, basically rigging, to electrical designing and creating luminaires. It's still a family-owned business. It's slightly larger today as it employs about 450 people. But hopefully it's encouragement to see that it doesn't matter how small you start, you can grow to be a big company. Today, we're building on about 30 years experience in lighting. We constantly invest in new technologies and people. The company's profitable company, but we use that profit for good. We constantly research and develop. This is the annex that we built in Belgium specifically as our showroom. So this is the size of our showroom, about the size of our Kia shop on average. So you can spend a few hours going around looking at our different lights. A little 28-meter counter-levered We call it the House of Light. It's a very representation place where we take a lot of our VIP clients and we bring in chefs that cook nice meals for them, and we present the latest and greatest if we have media that comes across from the world. But it serves as a new place, and the idea that we spend money ourselves on nice things to make things look nice, quality. It doesn't look particularly posh. There's nothing that's made out of gold or shiny, but we do believe in quality if we are going to sell the quality. It's also quite nice because it's on one of the main it's on one of the main motorways in Belgium. So if you're going to Brussels or back, you always pass and you always see a big black box. And at night time, the only light is this kind of Delta Light logo. So, like I mentioned before, we invest a lot in research and development. We perfect our products. The owner of the company is an absolute pedantic person. He's a perfectionist to the 100th level. Sometimes as a business owners, I don't know about you, we love the creation that we're trying to sell or there's something that we're starting, we can be quite perfectionists ourselves. Probably explains the reason why we don't mind working 6-7 days a week at our own business when every other person would rather be in a park or, I don't know, relaxing on a couch. If we're producing a product, sometimes we can be our own worst enemy because sometimes we look at it and we think, oh, it's not perfect. I still need to perfect it before I launch it into the market. Very quickly, the owner of the company, as the company grew, realized that sometimes there's a fine balance between finding something that's going to work, something that's going to be tested and proven, but at the same time not taking too long and launching it to the market. Us being able to use our own R&D but able to bring products very quickly because we have our own in-house certification allows us to always be one step ahead of the competition. So in the world of architectural lighting, we're in a kind of top 10 lighting companies. What usually tends to happen is every other year there's a show in Milan or Frankfurt. We present along with the other top lighting companies our new products, and it's similar to fashion, high fashion. We present the new stuff, and probably usually about 18 months later you can buy cheap knockoff copies of that from China on the web pages and or in cheaper shops trying to imitate, so to say, what they found. We are a global company. We span every continent, even though we're still family owned. And so we are from Bogota to Miami, Milan, New York, Paris, Hong Kong, Singapore, you name it, Beijing. There's a lot of places where we are present as Delta Light. There are some places where we work closely with partners. There is a difference similar to what was mentioned before. If you are invested in your own business, you are the best salesperson for your business. You believe in it, you have the passion to drive. Sometimes you can rely on your employees, your partners, but they're always going to be one step reserved from that. So we try wherever possible to go directly as Delta Light into that market. If it's recognized as the capital city of the design for that area, like New York, Milan, or Paris would be, we try to be there ourselves. If it's a lesser region, obviously we work sometimes with partners that would distribute our products. We're quite conscious of all the modern realization that what we take from the nature and what we take from the earth, we need to be a good citizen. So we need to make sure that we work in a sustainable way possible. So hence a lot of our light fittings are relatively simple in form, but we can use materials like aluminium, which is a very recyclable material. We use glass. Basically, where possible, we're going to use materials that are highly recyclable and are good, or as good as they can be to earth. We also try and run CO neutral production. So effectively the solar panels or the solar farm that we call it on our roof produces enough energy to power our own production and all the facilities on our campus. And in fact, on a good sunny day in Belgium, we probably produce enough to actually sell on to our neighbors around us, so we feed back into the grid a little bit. A little bit of our design language. This is a typical ceiling-mounted spotlight from Delta Light. It's a very simple shape, very modern, ultra modern, I would even call it. But the idea, the language design behind the Delta light has always been very simple, nothing too fancy. We don't do chandeliers, we're not Italians, we don't have Swarovskis and things like that. It's very clean lines, and the idea is actually the performance of the light and how that light illuminates the space. Whilst it needs to look nice, it needs to be able to at the same time blend in into the architecture. So the idea behind it is that sometimes we actually go outside our expertise market, and we will walk to other people from other categories. So we will walk up to an architect and say, what would you like to see in a light? How would you perceive an architectural light? And they might come up and do something like this that looks a bit like a lightsaber from Star Wars. This was a collaboration with the OMA architects, one of the largest architects in the world. We equally partnered with Edmunds Kalniņš-Kalnarājs, who's the fashion designer. You can see that very last pendant there. We gave him one of our solid pendants, and he started cutting into it with scissors because he said, oh, the shape reminds me of a dress. And he basically kind of played around with the cutting into it, and he said, oh, you know, as a woman would walk down a runway, you know, model, and maybe the dress is kind of flowing and stuff like that. So he basically cut into this luminaire. So we got these adjustable pedals that the client could take the pendant, but he can readjust, and it will create different spreads of light. So there's a lot of ideas that whilst we design ourselves, we are open to seeking inspiration from others. And that's where obviously networking also comes in. You know, nowadays, if we gather here on a day and someone's doing a retail shop, brick and mortar, someone else is maybe selling online, someone else might be doing, I don't know, a completely different thing, we can get all inspiration from each other. And this should be a safe place to do that. That's the reason, like Helmut said, that we're not here just to drink nice coffee and eat beautiful sushi and pastries. You know, the idea is to inspire each other. Sometimes that means stepping out of the comfort zone. So if someone asks you about your revenue or profit, it's not a dirty word. If you don't want to share it, that's absolutely fine. You know, it's a commercial secret if you want it to be. But equally, you shouldn't be ashamed if you're making £100 revenue this month, because who knows, in 2 years' time you might be turning over, you know, £100,000. So this is a space where you can kind of encourage each other and build each other. We are featured across a lot of the projects. So the company started out, and its roots was in residential and domestic lighting. So we work closely with designers and architects and developers that mostly did single residential projects and sometimes multi-residential projects. Although that same passion and design is translated into commercial spaces. So nowadays we work across from public projects, which would be things like, I don't know, museums, art galleries, public buildings, churches. We still do residential, we do office, commercial, we do hospitality, hotels, restaurants, spas, you name it. We do retail. And I thought it might be good maybe to share a few links to some images. I can briefly tell you what those projects are. I'm going to try and keep it relatively short. I've also brought a couple of books. If someone then wants to kind of leaf in your breakthrough, you can see some more images, some more descriptions about them. And then after that, if there's any questions, I'll take questions. If not, I'll keep it brief because there's a better presentation coming afterwards. So to give you some ideas, this is actually Utrecht in Netherlands, but obviously the Benelux countries, the Belgium, Netherlands, and all that kind of stuff. Some of their modern architecture is very simple lines themselves. So you can see the buildings are very straightforward, it's very square, very clean lines, very simple materials, a lot of timber or concrete, a lot of exposed ceilings, there's no additional false ceilings. So a lot of times the reason for a light being so simple in form and shape is that when you look into that space, they need to make sure that they illuminate at nighttime, but at the same time the light doesn't need to be the main focal point. The main focal point needs to be a historical Viking longboat or whatever they are displaying there. This is Art and Design Atomium Museum in Brussels in Belgium. Once again, the ceiling itself, you know, if it's a dark space, you know, there's a nice thing of lights being able to blend in where the focus is more on these, or equally, you can create high contrast. It's relatively simple lighting schemes, there's nothing fancy about it, but at the same time, the idea is that what's displayed there is taking the main stage. This is an office building that we did in Denmark. in Aarhus for the bestseller HQ. And the brief was very simple. The architect had designed this building and they wanted to use as much natural light as possible. So the idea was that there was a lot of glazed fronts, so every single side of the building had glazed windows. There was a lot of natural light coming in. And the idea is that during the daytime, there would be as little lights on as possible. You know, there would be the best light, which is the natural light like we have here today. However, at nighttime, to kind of continue that same language, they didn't want all of a sudden a whole bunch of fittings everywhere, so you would have to follow these kind of lines of light so it would kind of blend in with the architecture. Hence you see that the main illumination is provided by these linear lights that are incorporated into the fabric of the building. It's a very technically challenging project, but that's where kind of the expertise and added value comes in. And on these kind of projects, there's a reason why you can charge more. I've spoken before that, you know, obviously we always need to look at why we're adding value to a product. If we're selling that something that's a commodity, very quickly we're going to find that we're having to compete on price. Alvini's shop is finding out that all of a sudden, you know, there's a bunch of people realize that there's money in vaping stuff, you know, and there's tons of them coming on. If everybody nowadays can source from China, where's the added value, you know? So obviously people start competing on price and very quickly erodes the profitability and margins. So whatever business you are doing, you need to think, how am I able to add value? You know, an example might be, I don't know, a new high-end range of, I don't know, stainless steel gold holders or bamboo shop or whatever, you know, things like that. You know, that will be, yeah, for a businessman, you know, and you market against the high net worth individuals, whatever. That's just an example. This was another client in Ghent in Belgium. Once again, offices. Same thing, it's a commercial space. The client said, I'd like to illuminate a little bit differently. I think, I need to double check, but I'm pretty sure that you know, the client's kind of the requirements were, they wanted everything to kind of bit wow in the space, and it was supposed to be contradictory. So if there was a reception desk, you know, that had these kind of weird, wonderful shape and chorion, they wanted to kind of continue those same kind of sharp angles in the ceiling. In a smaller kind of hospitality space we're gathering, they had relatively small tables, but they wanted really oversized lights, so it kind of creates this kind of a contrast feel in that space. This is a project that we got involved directly with the head office of Starbucks. Any of you heard of Starbucks? Small coffee company. So we work directly with the Starbucks head office design team. Obviously they're a multi-billion dollar turnover company, but Starbucks has also realized that they are a commercial company, and a lot of times there's these small roasteries, mini roasteries coming up, and everyone's kind of competing against Starbucks, and everyone, how can you compete against Starbucks? You need to offer something that's unique, a bit of experience as opposed to, you know, coffee, because Starbucks is a massive supply chain, they can source things cheaper, they can always do. So Starbucks' answer to that competition was create these meccas, basically a place of worship for coffee lovers. So in select cities around the world, starting with Seattle, obviously the birthplace of Starbucks, but now there's already one in, I think, Shanghai, we just did Tokyo, Milan, and they're opening up all around the world. They have these 4-story dedicated buildings, they're called Starbucks Reserve Roasteries. And you go in there, first of all you see how your coffee gets roasted. There's a separate dedicated bar where you get like alchemists almost making coffee-based cocktails and drinks, non-alcoholic and alcoholic. There's a fresh pastry being made on premises by artisan Italian bread makers. There's all this kind of experience. And the idea, once again, with the lighting needed to be that, you know, how can we achieve that that space is illuminated where it needs to be, but at the same time creates this kind of a feel of almost like a holy place, almost like your a religious approach. Then, you know, it could be as simple things as residential places. This particular one is in Tamala. There's a house that was turned into a hospitality restaurant in Belgium and Roeselare. There's another one in Bangkok, Thailand. Once again, the challenge here was with the specialist timber ceiling and make the seamless pools of light so that when the light is on, even if the candles weren't there, you still created this tiny little pool of light, so it creates a very intimate feel for whoever's dining there. The idea with these kind of posh Michelin-style restaurants, if you are going to go and spend I don't know, 300, 400 euros or pounds per person on your meal, it's not just the quality of the food, it's the whole experience that counts. And obviously for a restaurant that's going to be expecting to turn over, I don't know, 4 or 5 million in the first year or something like that, for them to spend extra 300,000 on lights, if that's going to increase the attendance, is not a problem at all. The typical, is it your house in New Zealand? Yeah, this one? Right, okay. The typical New Zealand house. That's how everybody lives in New Zealand. Very simple, modern, clean, lots of open spaces. But once again, the idea is that we work alongside the architect and designer and obviously the end user. So how can we kind of achieve something that's special to them? In retail, once again, in this picture you can't even see the lights. The idea is that whatever the fittings we needed to use, we know what the main kind of illumination points needed to be. There's a little trick that all retailers use to kind of draw people in. It works on human psychology. In a good retail shop, even if it's I don't know, Debenhams or TK Maxx or something like that, if it's done rightly in a shopping mall, you'll see that what they'll tend to do is the front of the shop where the mannequins are bright, and usually the back of the shop is then also very bright, and the middle part is usually kind of the medium light levels. So the idea is that your eyes automatically drawn to the front as you walk past, so you kind of catch your initial eye, and then the brighter background or the back of the shop also draws you, and you kind of like just a psychological interest, so it makes you want to walk in and kind of walk all the way back through the shop. Once again, different ways of illuminating the spaces. This was a little chocolate shop in Dubai. If you're doing your break in the airport, you know, you can do a little quick duty-free shopping. Once again, you know, it's the whole idea is kind of the porous texture of the chocolate, and how, you know, how the kind of the lights kind of intersecting. It's almost like these kind of the bubbles in the, you know, airy chocolate. So, anyone go on the World Cup in Russia? Did anyone attend? No? This is one of the stadiums that we did for Krasnodar. Once again, obviously for Russia was a big event putting on the World Cup. So the idea was that the inside of the space needed to wow just as much as the outside. So once again, the brief was that it was massive, big open spaces, and how do we guide? So the light acts as both illumination, but also guides the kind of the natural traffic flow. Because obviously, if you gather 40, 50,000 people in one stadium, you know, everybody needs to kind of go out. You kind of want to create these natural transit spaces so that people kind of naturally just follow the eye. And a typical residential space in London. You've got to spare 5-7 million to do an apartment in London. The irony is the material is very little. You can see it's just exposed concrete, very kind of a basic levels. So the more simple you go with your material, the better quality that material needs to be and the better finish, because obviously everything stands out. So the client chose to spend on things like rugs and finishes and polished concrete. Obviously lighting was one of the important things. There's a downtown shopping center in the Dominican Republic. Once again, something a bit different with the lights. And then once again, a typical private residence in Belgium. Just put through some of these. Or something like this. It's a bit interesting space. Once again, we don't judge architects sometimes. You know, sometimes on the project we get involved. If the client really wants it, he is paying for it. Our duty is to tell him what's going to work and what's not going to work. But you know, at the end of the day, if he pays, he's the master. I do have a picture of Helmut's garage at home. Next one right here. He ordered a few lights from us to put his collection. His Volvo was not in there because he's obviously used it today to drive in here, but the rest of the collection's there. And once again, it's sometimes, you know, it's realizing that, you know, the good architecture complements the space around you, you know, and obviously, you know, there is that kind of a beauty of being able to overlook something that's big open spaces and at the same time create that kind of the feel, almost setting the stage. So positioning the lights and using the right light in the right way, you know, it adds that value. So the idea to our company is really that we don't sell lights, we sell the feel that the lights create to the person. And it says here, each project, it requires a customized approach, and you know, we look at how can we share this knowledge with the stakeholders involved, whether that's an interior designer or a end user. We go from the concept to delivery, and we add boatloads of value. We find out things that are going to make that project absolutely stand out. And I suppose that's the feel of every business, whatever we are doing, is that how can I find that one thing that my client really needs and he's going to find, you know, beneficial to him? How can I deliver that? And then how can I give him an extra 10% that he didn't expect? And that usually creates a return customer. That usually creates somebody you don't have to worry about the price as much anymore. You know, there's always going to be people arguing about the price, but you know, that customer, if he knows that he gets the extra 10, 15% from you above, all of a sudden you're swinging that, you know, kind of comparison out of the window. He doesn't look at somebody else that charges the same amount. He says, oh, it doesn't matter that they charge the same amount, I'll go to you because, or if you charge more, because I know you're going to deliver the best service. Anyway, that's a short presentation from me. Like I said, there's some books in the free time afterwards if you want to flip through them. If you have any questions, I like this.
Your company is doing the lighting on the project, so the suite is always some new projects going on, so you don't have a stock products, let's say like simple LED, I don't know, lights around or just bulbs or something.
There's about
working on specific.
There's about 25% that we stock. There's what we call the fast-moving lights that are very popular.
Made to order.
Yeah. So people, when they want our lights, they have to wait usually between 4 to 6 weeks. And then we charge them for delivery. And then we charge them for consultation. We charge them for everything. But they're happy.
If they get their expectations for deliverance, then they're happy.
Have you been in the shop a company Fitch or something like it's American?
Abercrombie & Fitch, yes. So Abercrombie & Fitch worked with a very famous lighting designer called Paul Nolte, and he decided to shock everyone, just like I think there wasn't there a famous Russian painter that did just a black dot on a painting or something like that, and everyone. So Abercrombie & Fitch, if you ever walk into that shop, they flip the whole concept upside down. And it's the darkest shop you'll ever be. You'll probably stumble in there. But ironically enough, they've got their little cult following, and whoever loves Abercrombie & Fitch will go in there and they'll enjoy the fact that you're walking around in darkness.
It's a bit strange experience. I've been there several times, and to be honest, I didn't get it.
Yeah. I didn't get it either. But you know, once again, you've got to give credit to the man, because he sold Abercrombie & Fitch on the idea that you shouldn't have any lights in your shop. You know, and they paid him.
I'm not sure even they're profitable. I thought they're closing down, no?
Could be, they're part of the. All I know is that he got paid about $100,000 for the consulting. So, go figure.
Well, but the other whiskey.